shower, same thing. Anyway, it was probably need to get this out. Yeah.
How's it going?
Oh, just peachy. Just peachy. Not at all peachy, but that's my answer. You know, I try to be. Oh, I gotta hide. I gotta hide. Gotta hide the good stuff. Dr. Connors. No. This is I think if she doesn't show this, will be the third time in a row she's snubbed me. So I can do it.
Left this number in the video. Maybe she'll be watching.
It is going to be recorded, so I could save this for posterity.
Yeah.
Hello. Nice to meet you. Congratulations. Hello.
Just to check on me. Last thing is. Okay, sounds good. She's.
Is she up?
You're good. It's like
UK.
won't be the last.
But she ended up going to Florida with her mentor, because her mentor went from UK to Florida.
We to talk about graduating from NKU and what he's doing now. We do have pizza in the back for everyone, so if you guys want to go back there and have your membership card ready, if you do not have a membership card, it is available to get pizza today, or you are able to become a member. It's either $7 for the semester to become a member, or it's $12 for the semester and next semester. And that just entails for you getting pizza for meetings or discounts on the t-shirts. Just gonna get pizza. Yeah.
And we also have candy, if anyone wants to take some. Yeah.
We're good for the recording. I think.
As far as I know.
Okay, sweet. We'll just keep all the awkward stuff in there. Fabulous. And is there like a clicker thingy, or do I need to use the keyboard? Is there like a clicker doodad, or do I need to use the keyboard? Well, sorry. I'll go back. There you go. You agree?
So what you get to but you're too much more.
Oh, the children.
Don't want to give it away.
All right. All right. Yes, yes, yes.
I charge for this. I just can't keep it away from her.
If you want to slice pizza.
I am good, but thank you.
Are you still cooking?
That is not in the presentation, so I will answer that question. Yes, I have a batch of bacon that I'm curing at the moment. I'm going to smoke that this weekend.
Making your own bacon?
I am making my own bacon, yes, sir.
Where do you get that?
Costco. Get a big old slab of pork belly and then go from there.
So you have like a salt bin and you put it in like. My friend's this like in his garage. It's made like a salt cake. Probably in there.
Guy sold it to me. Something to get it in the car. That's in process. A lot of that's your that we gotta go up on the process, but it's very nice.
Yeah.
You have to get hooked up with the. That's out.
Could you get cracking? Okay. No promises. Do not get your hopes up. Okay, so as you can see here, I just threw this up here just in case. Just as like a kind of a precaution that some of the stuff that I'm going to be covering in the presentation today is fairly intense in terms of the stuff that I work with every day. So if anybody happens to have any, kind of concerns or considerations for any of that sort of material, just as a fair warning, if you feel like you need to step out at any point or whatever, that's, go for it. No hard feelings. I will forgive you eventually for ducking out, but I would rather you feel safe and comfy than, stuck in here and trapped and just kind of, crawling in your own skin kind of thing. So just to kind of throw that out there. At any point, if anybody has any questions, please stop me. Sometimes when I start giving presentations, I kind of go into like sort of robot mode. Like I'm not even really thinking, I'm just sort of like blah, 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 and just kind of like just going for it. So if you have a question, like you might need to like stand up and like swing your arms around pretty aggressively for it to like click in my brain. So please do not feel any pressure to not make a fool of yourself to get my attention. My kids do it to me every day, so I'm well used to it. And just as kind of a disclaimer, technically speaking, I'm here representing my agency, which is Best Point, formerly known as the Children's Home of Cincinnati. Same organization, we just kind of merged with St. Al's and rebranded. So those two things are the same. If you happen to see any of those names anywhere, basically all the stuff that I'm going to say is mine, just kind of represents my own experience and my own opinions and all that kind of stuff. Nothing that my employer necessarily believes or feels or anything like that, and just kind of based on my own personal experience working in clinical work for a while. And then you'll slowly start to notice that I've got lots of like really dumb jokes and puns and stuff. So like a salt lamp grain of salt, because like therapists have salt lamps in their office all the time. Kind of stuff. Thanks, guys. Okay, just kind of rough ballpark number wise. Anybody interested in clinical work? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe. Ish. We will see if that is. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Round that up to like 7 because I'm bad at math. See if that sticks around by the end. So just kind of some personal background information about me in terms of where I'm coming from and my history. As mentioned already, my name is Alex Weiglein. I'm a graduate of this very fine program. So in case you are curious, yes, I did make this about myself because I am a narcissist. You'll, I think, kind of quickly figure out that I'm a little bit unorthodox in the way that I tend to do things. I'm a little bit off script. That works in some cases for some people, not for other folks. So that's just kind of the sort of the meme zeitgeist, I guess. I don't know. Kind of going. Some of my coworkers thought it was funny. Like I mentioned, I'm a proud graduate of the psychology program here from 2016. After that, I was a BHS behavioral health specialist. They used to call it mental health specialist, but then they changed it at Children's Hospital in inpatient psychiatry at the Collegeville location for about 5 years. About partway through there, I started doing Xavier's clinical mental health counseling program, which is kind of similar as the one here in terms of like what the degree is and what they teach and all that kind of stuff. I just happened to go with Xavier's because it kind of fit what I was looking for a little bit better. I got licensed as an LPC, or licensed professional counselor, which is my current licensure designation. In about another year-ish or so, depending on some math stuff, I will be eligible to take another licensure exam. I've already taken one. It's not fun. Don't recommend it. To get an LPCC, which is a licensed professional clinical counselor, which means I am an independent licensure. Right now, I'm required to have a supervisor in order for me to do anything anywhere. I cannot work on my own. I could not open up my own practice or anything like that without having somebody oversee me as designated, like that is like, I'm just licensed in Ohio too, by the way. That is like by law. I could not do that and get away with that. That would be a huge problem. But if I get an LPCC, then I can do that. So currently my title is a campus-based therapist at Best Point, formerly the Children's Home. Started in 2021. That was a huge doozy. I interviewed there in like, I don't know, November or something around 2020. I was supposed to get a job offer the week after our former director, who I have some strong feelings about because of this, who was on vacation, jerk. The week she came back, the day before I was supposed to get my job offer back, they had to close like campus and the position down because CPS went full remote for school stuff. So I had to wait a long time to get a job there. But eventually we kind of sorted out, got there started in May of 2021. I did a year at our lower school, which is basically our middle school that we have on our campus at our Madison Road campus. And now I'm in the upper school, which is the high school. There's a spot that opened over there. I tend to like high schoolers better than middle schoolers, trying to get away from middle schoolers since I started working with them for about 6 years. So I'm very much happy with the switch to high school. Primarily, I work with kids and teens with trauma histories, in addition to a wide variety of other diagnoses and clinical concerns. I will have a kind of a snapshot slide at some point in terms of the type of stuff that I tend to see. Thank you for.
So are you like a school counselor? Yeah.
So I have found that titles and like what you call certain positions and things at the master's level tend to get a little bit squirrely. So technically speaking, I am a counselor by training, but I'm like a clinical mental health counselor, not a school counselor, like with like academic advising and that kind of stuff. That's a different degree. So I would not be able to get a job and do like academic advising, some career prep kind of stuff. But what you think of as like a high school guidance counselor, that is a different thing than what I do. I do clinical treatment. I make treatment plans. I do therapy. That's what I do every day. So that's kind of a different kind of, you can kind of go two different ways depending on what you want in terms of degree and licensure at the master's level for counseling. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Okay. Yeah, so things can, I think this is kind of becoming more and more of a thing now where there's like what's called like school-based mental health, which is basically what I do. Our agency, Best Point, has our main campus where we have kids come on site for various programs that we have a whole bunch of different stuff. But we also, a huge part of what we do is have people like myself get licensed out or contracted out to different schools in the community, different high schools, middle schools, whatever. And they do school-based mental health there too, where it's like the same kind of job, it just happens to be at another school. So that's where like if you're at a high school or a middle school and say student needs to see like a therapist on site, that's what you would do, something like that. So if you're interested in doing clinical work with kids, school-based mental health could be an option in terms of like placement setting and that kind of stuff, or you would not be doing the academic like test prep and like that sort of stuff. Is that a little bit better? Okay.
I'll add that there are some.
Here we go. Here we go.
Of course.
I haven't seen you in so long. I have to get it in when I can.
There are some programs that NKU actually has a dual clinical mental health counseling and school counseling. So when you get done, you can pursue a career as a licensed professional counselor, but you can also get the credentialing to do guidance counseling in a school. And I think it's only I can't remember the number of credit hours, if it's an extra semester or what it is.
I think it kind of depends. Like Xavier does theirs too that way. And I knew for a while you could like double dip some of your credits and stuff. And I think they're changing that now, like for whatever reason, at least on Xavier's end.
You know,
Boo, you see, I just went to Xavier. I gotta be a jerk. I don't know. My guess would be yes, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's becoming more and more common for them to do both.
They do. It really varies by the school and what's going on at the school, you know, and what they need.
What their resources are available and stuff, they may strap you on with more than you are told you're going to be doing and what you're signing up for.
So that'd be a good question for somebody in that profession, is what percentage of your work is administrative, paper, getting people scheduled for classes versus kind of providing some of that emotional Thank you.
That's your one. I'm not currently trained in anything like EMDR, which is eye movement and desensitization and reprocessing, which is a type of trauma treatment. Trauma-focused CBT, CPT is cognitive processing therapy. Those are like kind of like trauma-specific types of treatments and trainings. I'm looking into some of those. They are expensive and kind of a commitment, so I'm not quite there yet. But those are some things that you can do as a master's level clinician. You don't necessarily have to do this kind of stuff at a doctorate level. There's a lot you can do at master's levels that you don't necessarily need to go like the full doctorate level to get. In terms of like how I tend to handle stuff, I think a lot of this kind of comes from my experience at the hospital, where we literally saw like if it was in the DSM, we saw it at some point. So there's not necessarily a specific strict of like, okay, well, this is how we have to handle this thing. This is how we have to handle it. It's just kind of like a generic, like one size fits all almost sort of approach. So I kind of take that same sort of approach in the sense of like, I want to get to know the person first, figure out what their needs are, what they click with, what works for them, and then kind of tailor interventions and what I do after that, as opposed to just kind of coming in with a specific set of tools. Like this is the only type of thing I'm going to be doing with all of my kids. I try to like tailor it as much as I can to whatever they need. So this is also how I feel a lot of times, like when things kind of work, because especially with kids, things can be a little bit squirrely as opposed to like what you would see with like adults. Things are not quite as clear cut. Not that adult work is like super easy, but working with kids is kind of its own unique, wild west kind of thing. It's a very, very interesting line of work. And so sometimes when I pull stuff out of my butt, which is pretty frequent, and manage to get something to work, it's very exciting. So some of the dry and boring stuff, some of this we've already kind of touched on in terms of like background stuff, in terms of like kind of what you could do like after you graduate from the bachelor's level stuff. And maybe I might let Dr. Bartlett chime in if I'm feeling generous about some other stuff. These are the two areas that I have heard of or like have known about most in terms of like other people have working these jobs or what I've done myself. So like a BHS at Children's Hospital inpatient, it's basically crisis stabilization unit. In theory, the way it's supposed to work is a kid comes in with some sort of mental health crisis. Either they're like feeling like extremely suicidal, or they're trying to like attack somebody, hurt themselves, try to kill somebody, something really intense thing that you couldn't necessarily handle at like an outpatient level or like with your like day-to-day therapy kind of stuff, or like a school therapist. Then they come over there if there's like a true crisis emergency kind of situation and kind of get stabilized, patched back up, and then shipped back out. So that's what I did for about 5 years. It's extremely difficult work. Odds are good that if you, at least at Children's, I can't speak to any other organizations just because I don't know. Odds are good you're probably going to get hurt. Psychiatry has the greatest injury rate in the hospital. My glasses that you see right here, I got these for free. All I had to do was pay the price of admission of having my head crushed in a door. And it was a very, very thick, very heavy wooden door. I was checking in on a kid who was trying to barricade his room with big, heavy chairs filled with sand, and the other staff could not quite get him to chill out. We had a so-so relationship. Like, yeah, sure. Hey, like, what's going on, man? What's going on? And then it was like one of those things where people talk about like car crashes or whatever, where time just sort of like slows down and you can't do anything. I just saw a door just like swing wide open. It's just like, okay, I know it's about to happen. And then a giant wooden door like pinned my skull in a door frame, crushing my glasses. Luckily, this is like one of the times that having a really thick, bony skull has worked out in my favor, like being really, you know, strong-headed, because I felt mostly okay afterwards. But that is something just to kind of be aware of if you're jumping into that, because that was not something that was particularly made clear to me when I signed up to do that job. They were not very clear in terms of the expectations of what's going to go on. So just be aware that that is extremely hard work. Case management also is a pretty common opportunity, probably with some sort of community agency, possibly like with ours or maybe a county program. There's lots of different options for that. I don't have any direct experience myself because I haven't had one of those jobs, but it is entirely possible that those would be less intense in terms of day-to-day stuff, because you're not literally doing crisis management with like kids at their most intense all day, every time you show up. In my experience, and from what I've heard, like when I went to Xavier, one of the professors there had kind of recommended something like this in terms of like, if you want to get clinical experience before you commit to a master's program and like really digging your heels in with this kind of stuff, one of these two jobs would be a good way to kind of gauge, like, am I cut out for this? Is this what I want to do? You know, that kind of thing. There are probably a bunch of other options that you could maybe talk about. Maybe Dr. Bartlett could chime in. I'll be nice.
think that's great.
Okay,
You hit them, yeah.
okay, fabulous,
Yeah,
thank you.
lots of social, North Key, Community Care, Brighton Center, Cincinnati Behavioral Health, there's lots of organizations that have kind of those case management types of positions. If you're not up for the more crisis management stuff at Children's, yeah, for sure.
Yep, if you're gonna be doing this, you're gonna be working in community mental health for the most part, which unfortunately tends to be where the most severe mental health needs tend to be in terms of most intense diagnoses, most intense needs, highest level of care, that kind of stuff. You're gonna be working with some probably pretty extreme stuff, which is feels like it should be kind of backwards, like you start off easier and kind of ease into the more intense stuff as opposed to like, hey, you have 0 clinical experience. Let's go into the most like intense possible stuff you could possibly do. That sounds like a really great plan. In terms of next steps, after you have some sort of level of clinical experience and have some, kind of experience, counseling master's programs, kind of like we were talking about before. That's what I did. We kind of touched on having like the school and clinical piece. I know a friend of mine, she's working on finishing up her master's through this program here. And I think she originally signed up for the school program. And I think that was just going to be another semester, but the way that it worked out was that it was like she was going to have to do stuff like like she couldn't work. She had to do everything full time. Most master's programs, in my experience, are kind of designed for working professionals as opposed to like all you have time is for school, like a PhD or like a PsyD program, like all you do is school all the time. In that case, that was a little bit different. So that's also something to kind of keep in mind of like what the expectations are before you sign up for something like that. Clinical programs primarily focus on training you to be a clinician or a therapist. In my experience, typically there's about 1.5 years of like active clinical training where you're seeing clients. At Xavier, the way it worked is we had a 1-semester program for a practicum where you had like kind of like a baby internship. You had like maybe 5 or 6 kids. I think I only had like 1.5, and so we had to like figure out some squirrely stuff to get my hours in. But after that, you do about a 1-year-long internship, depending on how you kind of break stuff up. There's some flexibility in terms of how you can do some things, but usually by the end of it, you'll have about 1.5 years of like actual clinical experience under your belt before you go out into the field and start working as a therapist full time. Kind of talked about like the school program kind of stuff. I know Xavier has some stuff about, I don't know if it's for a licensed chemical dependency counselor. There's some sort of like addiction specialty kind of thing that they're doing. I don't even know exactly what that all involves, but some programs, depending on what you're interested, can have some kind of like specialized focuses or different things where you can kind of tailor your interest in depending on what it is that you want to do. So definitely something to kind of peek your eye out for and just be aware of what they're doing. Typically though, in my experience, they tend to try to treat you and train you as like a generalist. I did not get any specific training whatsoever on working with kids or teenagers other than like when I was doing my internship, getting supervised for my supervisor on site, that kind of thing. I had like a developmental class, I think. There was no class on like child psychopathology or any of that kind of stuff, at least in my program. So if there's a specific population you want to work with, try to keep that in mind too, that some places are not going to allow you to have that focus or that niche kind of like narrow down training that you might get at other places. Just something else to kind of keep in mind. And I will forever admire you for having superior taste in licensure and training. However, if you go to the dark side, the Sith, if you will, of social work, I honestly don't have that much information about what that all involves, but I'm super biased against them because I'm a jerk. A lot of where that comes from is, and I've kind of seen this happen in my experience, where you can get into a social work master's program and take like maybe a class on therapy and just basic level stuff, and then you graduate, get licensed, and then can bill yourself as a therapist and can go out and do clinical work, allegedly. So depending on what you're interested in, like if you want to do specifically clinical work, be a therapist, be a clinician, working one-on-one with people or with families or whatever, be aware of what your program is offering, what they're training, like look through the coursework. If you know you want to be a clinician, counseling is probably a better fit for you. If you're not totally sure, or you want kind of like to be able the option to kind of like do administrative stuff or work at nonprofits or do like whatever different levels of things, social work probably is a better fit because it's kind of like a bigger, broader range of stuff that you can do. Not to say that like I couldn't do some of those things as a counselor, but like at least in Cincinnati, especially for Children's Hospital, they definitely prefer social workers over counselors. I don't know why. They're a bunch of jerks too, despite running around with a water bottle with their logo on it. So that's another thing too. The different reasons depending on where you're going to go. some places prefer one licensure over the other, and Cincinnati happens to be social work. Who knows?
If I may interject,
Okay, here we go.
I'm gonna,
Oh, we know.
I think part of it probably many children in the social work is because of the breadth of training that social workers get in community resources and helping people navigate insurance and finding a place to live and what do I do afterward, and,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's a different training philosophy, right?
Absolutely,
For a
yeah.
counseling degree versus the social work,
Mm-hmm.
and you illustrated that by the coursework, you know, the differences in the, so I would suspect that is probably why they might.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure there's plenty of good reasons. I'm just being an ornery jerk about it.
We didn't train you that.
No, I didn't. No, you didn't. It's what happens after you leave, when you start working and things go haywire. Yes, grad school broke my brain. I didn't used to have this hair or this beard, but I just kind of let stuff get weird
You
for a
watched the
while.
Weird Al movie, I thought. That's not my question.
Yeah, I'm gonna say like,
So, you know, I do a lot of academic advising. I have students
Yes.
find things that I don't even know about, and so one student found, you know, it's kind of, a lot of students want to get into counseling like this, and a student at the bachelor's level found something, it's called a CDCA program, which sounded like what you had on that
the
last
chemical
slide.
dependency, something.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
sounded, at least from the letter that he showed me, that you can do that at the bachelor's level, but it sounded like he was going to need like 6,000 hours of, yes, like training. to do
Yeah.
it, But
In
it sounds like
Kentucky, you could do chemical dependency counseling
without a master's.
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what it was. So you.
That seems-
I guess it's like a program you.
That seems suspect.
A certificate. But for a lot of students, that might be, if that's what they want to do.
Potentially, yeah. Most of what I know about is biased towards Ohio. That's just where I've always worked. The Kentucky side I'm not as familiar with. I will hold social work against you forever. Maybe I will forgive you at some point. Marriage and family therapy, that's kind of, at least in my experience, not as common in terms of like degrees. Like I don't see MFTs around it as much. And my understanding is that the training is mostly focused on like doing couples work or family work. So if that's kind of the interesting, like the dynamic you're interested in working in, this might be another way to kind of specialize or kind of niche your way into something. That doesn't mean you can't do other things. In a lot of cases, in my experience, all three of these levels of degrees can be kind of interchangeable in the sense that the training is generally broad enough or similar enough that you can kind of do different things with like different degrees. So you're not necessarily going to get locked into one thing forever. But this is kind of like a more specialized version of some of this stuff to do like marriage and family work, if that's what you're into. They're all kind of covered by the same board. Art therapy is another one that is not something that like I could do. Like if I want to call myself an art therapist, I could not do that as a counselor. I have to go through another master's program, possibly doing like bachelor's level work of like, it sounds kind of silly, but like taking art classes. So I know what it is that I'm doing in terms of like materials and how to actually do it. So if you're interested in art therapy, that is its own specialized, unique niche thing. You have to go to school for art therapy. You can kind of trick some insurance company stuff if you say like, I did an art therapy activity in my billing. So we tend to do that sometimes, but I can't like call myself an art therapist or to do like specialized art therapy work kind of stuff as a counselor with my training. Yes.
Question.
Answer, daily double.
So my understanding too is that if your degree is in art therapy, you are not going to then be able to later obtain licensure to be a licensed professional clinical counselor. Right? Like
It might as well be like an MBA, like a totally different thing. Like there's no train, like there might be like, maybe they'll give you some credit for like, oh, well, you took this class, like something maybe, but they are not like interchangeable. Like you have to do like one or the other or go through both programs in order to do
So
both.
that's what we have to think about ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because if you do the art therapy, you are going to be.
This is absolutely pigeonholing yourself. This is like, I want to do art therapy and I only want to do art therapy and I'm not doing anything else. Then you do that. But otherwise that you're like stuck. That's all you're going to be doing.
Yeah, Alex, that would sound like, so say at someone at Children's, they might just walk to each individual room, just do that, they're council.
Correct. Everything that they do is art therapy specific interventions, not just like sitting down talk therapy.
Yeah, related to the next one, music therapy. So my daughter Lucy, when she was born, it was just the music therapist would come in with her guitar and sing. Bring instruments, but
Yeah.
that's all she did. She didn't
Yeah.
talk about family problems or
Yep, these are very like specific niche areas that are like you really like narrowing down only doing this like one thing. Sex therapy, in my experience, is not necessarily like a specialized type of like a program or training like that's something that you can kind of like, if I wanted to get trained and be a sex therapist, I could do that with my level of licensure. It's not something I have to go like get a master's program and do that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind for that. And then the chemical dependency stuff tends to be like another like add-on thing later, as opposed to I'm going to school for chemical dependency counseling masters kind of thing. Yeah, something big to kind of keep in mind too is that getting your doctorate absolutely not required to be a therapist. In my experience, and kind of this is kind of from what I remember from some of the training stuff, I'll give Dr. Bartlett some credit that I do remember this. That in a lot of cases, if you want to get your PhD, they tend to prefer you jump right into that as opposed to like doing like a master's in counseling. And you can get a master's degree in, a doctorate in counseling after you get your master's, but that's mostly if you want to teach. But if you want to do like a clinical psychology PhD program kind of thing, in my understanding is that they prefer you generally to just jump into that as opposed to like do a master's thing in another semi-related field and then jump over to that. Does that kind of track for my clinical folks?
Yeah, if you meet the requirements for entrance for the doctorate, do that first.
Yes.
Yeah. Go right for it.
That emoji did not work like I wanted it to.
Well, Alex, it's on that last slide.
Yes.
So I get this all the time too. So would you recommend, say, someone who's applying, say, Xavier PsyD program versus clinical mental health program? Like, what's going to be the difference? Career outlooks?
Student loan debt is for one. Like a PsyD program especially is going to be a very expensive bill to have. In my experience, doctorate level clinicians, the reason you would do that is to do more specialized and specific assessments. Like technically speaking, I could diagnose somebody with autism or autism spectrum disorder, but it's kind of like a bogus diagnosis unless there's like testing to back it, especially with like kids. There's like very specialized specific training to get an autism diagnosis. That type of training and that type of assessment tends to be specific to doctorate level people who have like very intense, very specific training and know specifically what they're doing. I think that would also be something like, was it the MMPI2, the personality one? I had to take that and like, we had to take that and like, do it. That was awful. Interesting, but that was almost like 600 questions. It was brutal. So like typically for doctorate level, it's like specialized assessments, doing kind of more niche stuff of like higher levels of care, getting involved in like research if you want to do that kind of stuff. It's typically like more advanced, like extra like higher level stuff, as opposed to master's level tends to be primarily more like on the ground doing one-to-one work in an office, kind of the day-to-day grind kind of stuff. Not that you can't do that with a doctorate, of course, but at the master's level, that tends to be more of what you do.
So Alex, like the school psychologists, would they be diagnosing people with autism and learning disabilities in the school system?
School psychology, that is an interesting one. I'm glad you brought that up because I
If they
didn't
don't do
put that in
therapy,
here.
would they be doing?
So I didn't know anything about this until I started working at my current job, that there is a difference between a clinical diagnosis and an educational diagnosis. I had no idea. So I could diagnose, like, let's say, for example, hypothetically, like I diagnose a kid with autism, school does not. I'm being recorded, so I'll have to censor myself. They do not care until they have a school psychologist come in and do another evaluation and do like an educational diagnosis, which basically is like, if you want to have special accommodations, testing, like adjustments, like any of those kinds of things, where it's like, okay, like the student needs like an extra 40 minutes of time to complete a test, any of that sort of stuff. They'll have to have the school psychologists get involved and do those kinds of assessments because that's just how the school system likes to do things. They also do like IEPs, which I forget what that stands for, but that's like a specialized education training thing. Where like you have like specific, like the student needs, these specific needs to be met at this education institution, like this is what you have to provide as diagnosed by us. All the kids at my school on campus have IEPs.
Individualized education.
That's it, thank you. So those are like specific to like school psych or school counseling, that like that kind of stuff. Well, really school psych for the bigger assessment kind of stuff. That's more like working with a school system to do like educational diagnosis, like that sort of stuff. Is that
Right, but so they say they diagnose somebody with autism or some other, or some type of mental disability. And then from that, then they say, okay, because they have this disability, therefore, these are the education accommodations to be made.
yeah, that would be like what a school
So-
psych would
so
do.
Is the diagnosis is made by the clinician or by the school psychologist?
That would be the school psychologist.
And then they would recommend a plan.
Correct. So that would like they're sort of parallel, but like what I have to say clinically does not really matter to what the school psych, like we can like talk, like this is what I think it is, here's my like that kind of thing, but whatever I have in my treatment plan, my notes, any of that kind of stuff does not matter at all. It might as well not even like
Since you work
exist.
in a school setting, so if you find out a kid has a certain psychological disorder,
Mhm.
that could change how you treat them in the school environment.
Sure.
So would you make a recommendation that in the system you work in, school system, that this kid needs? this
Oh, yeah,
kind of
absolutely. Like, yeah,
interaction?
one of the big things that you will do is like you do like community mental health, like school-based mental health. Is like advocating for the students and what their needs are based on what you're seeing. And that might not necessarily be like, it might not like amend the IEP and like make adjustments based on what you're saying, but like that's like on the paperwork side, that's like the
Yeah, it's more behavioral.
documentation.
So there's kind of an overlap there.
Yeah, sort of, but it's like
Within a
what I would
school
say is not
system,
necessarily like officially included in their documentation. I can be like, okay, well, hey, you've got Johnny in your class, really, this is what you should be doing. That sort of thing, but it might not like make it onto the IEP, you travel with them, that sort of thing. So it's kind of a pain in the butt hurdle sort of thing.
But like a behavior modification program, for example. Would that be you or?
Like an ABA kind of thing, they have, at least with our school, we have like specific applied behavioral analysis team that they do their own separate kind of thing, and that's kind of related to us, and we work with them, but they are their own plan, their own team, they come up with their own stuff, do their own meetings, their own data collection, that's like its own separate team of people. What I do is like strictly therapy. In theory, at least. Good questions, thank you. All right, so back to my emoji that broke. So I hope kind of one of the things that I've kind of maybe not explicitly made clear is that I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. This isn't anything that I'm like trying to like be like, oh my gosh, isn't this place so wonderful? Everything's great. There's never any problems. Like clinical work is the best thing ever. There's no problems whatsoever. Everything's just constantly great all the time. So this is kind of where I have to kind of balance, like, technically I'm here representing my employer, but I also want to be honest with you guys because some of this stuff doesn't really get translated in like LinkedIn advertisements or, career fair kind of stuff where they try to like, hey, things are great. Come on down. It's all great. Everything's like Skittles and beer and whatever. Everything's fabulous, but stuff gets weird. So in my experience with like clinical stuff, with my level of folks, people I know, coworkers of mine, friends of mine, any of that kind of stuff, there's kind of a general trend where it's like, I want to help people. That's maybe like your undergrad level kind of stage. Go to grad school, get into more student loan debt, get licensed. Most people tend to start in community mental health or CMH. By the time you're ready for independent licensure, you get pretty burnt out because they will take advantage of you. They will abuse you. They will overwork you. They will underpay you. Not Best Point, but everybody else, not us. And then the steps from there are like you really like dig your heels in and like stick with community mental health if that's your jam. Some people love it. Typically you'll possibly go to private practice or GTFO and go somewhere else. So just trying to be frank with you. I want you guys to be understanding like what you're getting into if this is something you want to do. This will involve being stressed, exhausted, mistreated, taken advantage of, overworked, underpaid, and burnt out. Like I mentioned, this is not an easy gig. You will slowly start to lose your mind. I keep telling people I have this like squishy brain fidget thing in my office, and I keep telling people that I like have to stick it on top of my head to like get extra brain power throughout the day if I'm like really extra brain fried, which is pretty often. It's not an easy gig. I don't think most people are going to tell you that, especially like HR recruitment people. They probably are not going to be honest about this kind of stuff. So that's why I think it's important to kind of share this stuff to you guys so you actually know what you're getting into. You got to take care of yourself. Being loyal to an agency does not pay your rent or your food bills. It's a business, not your friend. They were going to keep their priorities their interests, their finance, their bottom line, all that, that is gonna be the priority, not you. Don't be above believing your clients will survive. They have survived worse than losing a therapist. In many cases, the kids that I have worked with have had half a dozen, if not more, therapists that they've already kind of worked through as they kind of get stuck in the system of community mental health and kind of getting stuck in the cycle. You're a human being too. I know it's sometimes, in my experience, I think too, psychology students are definitely like the people pleaser kind of crowd. I don't know if anybody else is a guilty people pleaser, but you have to take care of yourself and keep in mind that you have your own needs and you need to do things to take care of yourself. And there's always gonna be more jobs at other places. One of the good and bad things about community mental health is that the turnover rates are so high is that pretty much everywhere you go, you're gonna be able to find a job somewhere. Ain't that great? If you do not want to do clinical work, that's totally fine. I don't think there's any shame in not doing that. Sometimes I think there can be kind of a culture of like, you know, we get into these kind of programs, we do these kinds of things. The intention is like, well, we're supposed to do things to help people. And, you know, the objective is to go out of your way and like make a career out of being this helping person and doing all this kind of stuff. But if that's not for you, then that's not for you. And I think that's totally fine. Especially also if you try it for a while and then you decide this is absolutely not for me. I cannot tolerate this. I don't want anything to do this. And I want to run away with my hair on fire, screaming in the other direction. I have seen that in more times than I could possibly count, and good for them because it's not easy. Knowing your limits and boundaries is good. And I personally think this is one of my many soapboxes. Agencies need to do a better job about taking care of their employees instead of designing jobs to have a shelf life of a year or two. Not best point. Remember, but that's what I got. Any questions so far? I feel like I keep lobbing stuff out. There it is. I was waiting for it.
But somebody from coming to psychology club and hearing from awesome speakers like you who have this experience and will tell.
I wasn't
the
fishing, but I like what I caught.
good, the bad, and the ugly. Your slide about no shame if you find out clinical work is not for you. What can undergraduate students do to learn about that before they go and pursue a master's degree and start doing this clinical work? And now I have this degree and it's not for me. You know what I mean? So like what?
As I understand it, we've got some crack staff members here who are just really at the top of their game getting internships for undergrad students. As I understand, we might have one of those in the room right now, possibly. Allegedly.
Turn now.
Based on what you're hearing from students, in the field, what you're saying is consistent with their experience. It's hard work, they're underpaid, they're sometimes taking advantage of. And that occurs for case management.
Absolutely. To drive people around in your cars all the time.
So there are opportunities. I recommend this.
Absolutely try before you buy. Absolutely. Oh, yes, sorry.
That's Dr. P.
She did not pay me to bring that up, by the way. Okay, so I'm gonna try to fly through the rest of this super quick because I am talking too much. In terms of my typical day. So upper school, like I said, on our main campus, our high school. Any given time, I have roughly 30 to 35 clients, which is a lot to manage. Depending on if they show up or if they are incarcerated or on probation or not showing up for school or, you know, God knows what else is going on. My teenagers are wild. Typically running from 30 to 3:30 in terms of hours, but if you are a responsible adult, that's what you would do. If you're me, you're typically running in late with the kids as they're coming into arrival and then staying late. Hence my meme at the top. Generally starting off the day by greeting all the clients with the education staff as they get checked in, they put away their property. They're not allowed to have cell phones on site. I know some schools are like that, some are not. Then I typically see clients back to back from 8 o'clock till 2, averaging, depending on the day, about 6 in a row. Yes, that is exhausting. Yes, it is terrible. Most of the time I do not eat lunch. End of the day typically involves debrief meetings with the education staff, just kind of touch base, see how the kids are doing, who was struggling, what was going on. Doing paperwork, phone calls to parents, various other meetings. I have weekly supervision with my boss, which is very typical for clinical roles. Instead of like a monthly meeting with your boss, whatever, typically it's supposed to be once a week to kind of go over what's going on clinically. In terms of the stuff that I do with my kids when they're in my office, some of them are super direct and prefer one-on-one conversations, and we just kind of sit there and just chat the whole time, nothing else. Other times they prefer doing artwork, playing games, getting fidgets, a variety of different things. I've got like all sorts of stuff in my office for them to pick from. Some go-to choices include Uno. My Rock'em Sock'em robot set that I just got is very popular, although it's probably going to break soon because they like it too much. Doing some painting, walking around campus because our campus is actually really pretty. We got a lot of walking space, and then a wide variety of stuff for them to regulate with. So my delightful children, every single time I get a chance to include this picture in a presentation, I do. I think I've done it every time that I've come back to talk to you guys, and I think it's hilarious every time. Primarily my caseload is made up of male identified POC students because, as I'm sure many of you are probably well aware, that the system is rigged against them. Trauma history is basically guaranteed, commonly involved with Hamilton County Jobs and Family Services. We usually just call them just JFS. Foster care, group homes, and similar custody and living arrangements. A history of ongoing legal system issues in a variety of contexts. I've got a couple of kids who have parole officers, all sorts of stuff going on. This is the slide I was talking about in terms of like clinical issues that I tend to see. Common diagnoses are ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and CPTSD if the AP wanted to be nice. Generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, persistent depressive disorder, or bipolar disorder. I also might have a student who might have borderline personality disorder. We're not sure yet. Other clinical concerns include in utero exposure to drug use or substances, ongoing substance use concerns, cognitive or developmental considerations, complex family dynamics, unhealthy living environments, food insecurity, low income, single parent households, lack of transportation, self-harm, suicidal ideation, past and or ongoing trauma. Whew. Did you get all that?
So like I said, so how does a child end up in school? So obviously there's.
Typically, the way it works is they attend a community school, generally within Cincinnati Public or other districts. We don't just serve CPS. And for whatever reason, something happens, the school, the way I try to phrase it is the school can't meet their needs, because usually that's what I suspect is actually going on. Or something happens and the school just can't handle them, and then they might refer them to us. Like one of the kids on my caseload got into a fight over some dating drama and then ended up jumping off of a table and like body slamming a cop. That's one of them. That's a fun one. She's probably my favorite kid. I love her. She's hilarious. She scares me, but I love her.
So they could be living still at home. They
Could be at home, could be group homes.
They live actually at your facilities.
No, we do not have any residential services. No, but we do have, there's Lighthouse Youth and Family Services. They have a semi-independent living program where I've got a couple of my kids who are like above 18 and they're sort of like living in their own apartment, but it's kind of within the context of.
Probably a lot of foster care.
Definitely a lot of foster care, yeah, for sure. And the thing I always have to remember about those kids is that I have to talk to their GFS worker, not the foster parent, to get stuff signed off. Forget that all the time. So a sample of what I've dealt with recently in the past couple of weeks. This is kind of where we get some of the content orienting stuff. So I've had to stop a client from throwing themselves down a staircase multiple times recently, same particular kid, who actually met with just before I came over here and was addressing some more suicidal ideation kind of business. Never stops. Client getting sexually assaulted by a peer, client going missing, MIA with no information about their whereabouts. That has happened multiple times, sometimes repeat offenders, sometimes not. A little while ago, I spent around 11 hours with a client at Children's ED to manage medical treatment, to kind of be a support person because their guardian had taken a curtain rod and just beaten the snot out of them with it. And obviously we could not rely on the guardian to take care of them at the hospital. They were not going anywhere near that person anymore. And so I had to work with their caseworker who was in Columbus, who had to do a bunch of paperwork to try to figure out stuff of who they could possibly transfer this kid to for custody arrangement stuff. And kind of helping manage and kind of advocate for my kid, as the medical staff there had no idea what they were doing. Well, the kid that I mentioned, one of my faves, just got like brutally attacked by a kid at school after like a little spat, and I missed it, but like went home with like a totally bloody face, was black-eyed for weeks. Getting arrested for aggressive outbursts, both on and off campus. Got a couple of kids at some pending court dates, and then numerous other fights or conflicts. So suffice to say, they keep me busy. So try to end on maybe a positive note. These kids are the strongest people that I know. I genuinely do not know any people on the planet who are stronger than these kids, and they are truly, and I'm not just saying this as like a agency rep or just trying to be nice or whatever. They help me get through my days because I look at them as a source of inspiration for myself and getting through some things that I'm dealing with. I get to see a side of these kids that most people never get to see, especially from like a system kind of perspective. They just see like, here's this like pain in the butt problem kid. He's just like a huge jerk causing all these problems. When I get to see them in my office, it's like I get to see them as a child, and I get to be a child as opposed to being like on defense mode all the time because of all the trauma stuff going on, which is really exciting. For some kids, I am the only safe person that they have, which is a lot of responsibility, and it's kind of a big honor of mine. I get to see and celebrate their successes. I forgot to bring it with me, but I've got this little it's like a Staples Easy button, but it says hype on it, and it has like that DJ that like air horn thing. And so whenever kids get good news or they like advance in a level at the school, they do stuff, I will bring that out and just like hit it as hard as they possibly can because of how excited they are. I also have a bike horn that I honk at them with, because it sounds like a goose. It's like you're being a silly goose right now, and I honk it at them. Try to keep it entertaining. And I get to have a lot of fun at work, at least sometimes. Working with teenagers is hilarious. They are incredibly creative and wacky people, and they're very, very rarely is there for like a dull moment in one way or another at work, because they keep it entertaining for sure. In terms of how do I do it, try to do self-care. I've been trying to get more into getting back into some like creative stuff because that's like super good and healthy for my brain. Try to advocate for myself when I can, and setting limits with other people at work who try to like barge into my office in the middle of a session to try to tell me stuff that could have been an email. Not that I have experience with that. I also don't handle things very well. I handle things poorly. I don't manage my stress like I should, and I can let it get in the way of good work. I don't think a lot of people will be honest and say that, because I think there's sort of like this culture of like, we have to be perfect all the time. We got to be great. I can't ever tell people that I don't do my job well. I tell people that all the time, that I don't handle things like I should. And that's something that I think we need to be more honest about as a field, as a line of work. And like I mentioned before, that burnout is a huge epidemic in the clinical world. I'm hopeful that's going to start to change, but I'm not holding my breath anytime soon. So of like the 7 people, some of them may have disappeared, but is anybody still interested, or have I scared you all away? All the way. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've converted some people. Oh my God! What? We'll just count them as a yes, and just count that as a success for me. I've converted some of you. What's wrong with you? Any questions? I do have some time to kind of stick around. I know I talked longer than I was hoping for. For those of you who do have to leave, feel free to get my email or talk to Dr. White or Dr. Kroll, and then they can give that to you. And then please send me an email. I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to help you out. Give you more information if you have any other questions or any other stuff. Give me feedback about how boring I was, whatever you want to do. Won't hurt my feelings that much. But yeah, that's what I got.
Hey, Alex, can you hear me? Can you guys hear the people online?
Thank you.
Is that a yes?
Oh, it's
Hello.
Want to say hi? It's nice to see you again.
You too. Step around this way. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Understand more about these differences in these clinical fields.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. But they don't really- so they hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I.
Yo, shoot it.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for coming. So early. Thank you for having me. Yeah.